everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cameron Bell. I'm your host as always. And firstly, I'd like to wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas. I hope Santa was good to you and certainly a lot better than he was to us on Boxing Day. Joining me to talk about an absolute capitulation in Paisley is my very good friend, Kevin Armstrong. Kevin, I hope until yesterday you had an extremely pleasant Christmas.
I did, mate. It was very nice. But now you get to the part of the season where it's just repeats on telly. And yes, I include Rangers in that.
Yeah, a very disappointing day, I think it's fair to say, Kev. It's interesting because obviously when you get to this time of year and you don't really focus on dates, it's just whatever day Christmas happens to fall on, and then after that you go straight back into the football. And we did have a feast of football yesterday. I think it's fair to say Rangers were the late kick-off in the Scottish Premiership. We'll go through the lineup. You do obviously our preview show on our Patreon site. And I'm keen to kind of get your thoughts on the lineup compared to what you had predicted. Jack Butland returned in goals after welcoming the arrival of his little girl. James Tavernier, Dejan Sterling, Lane Balogun and Jeffy made up the back four. Diomande, Barr and Hadji came in with Cherny, Egerman and Bajrami. So how did that compare to your preview lineup, and what were your thoughts when you saw that team when it got announced?
I can understand why Raskin's taken out with the manager's pre-match comments about the booking. I think that's fair. It's quite easy for us to sit here, Cammy, and say after the way Raskin would come on and impact the game, he should have started them. But if he gets a silly booking, then we win comfortably. We sit and say, why did you start him, blah, blah, blah. So totally fine with that. We done the car pod again on our Patreon site last week for Dundee, and we both agreed that Robin Propper had been playing quite well. But I think it speaks volumes of the fact that we went back to Balogun just for the physical nature. So it's no surprise to see Balogun coming back in there. Forward thinking, this is where the sort of dilemma comes in, and this two strikers thing has been working for us. I don't think we see many people picked as to go back to the sort of square sort of pegs and round holes that we put back up there. Various people have been playing well in that area. Cherny was spoken about at length as, while he doesn't dominate games for 90 minutes, he's certainly good for a goal and an assist. He would come on and have an off day. Egerman has come on leaps and bounds the last month or so. But I think I picked Danilo to start because I just believe that Danilo is our all-round best forward. I say Butland coming back in, I know has caused a couple of points, but I think that was only natural. Had we lost and Butland never played, there would have been an uproar. Of course, he did play and had a rather big impact in the game, and not quite the way we wanted him to. But from a point of view of the start lineup, Cammy, I don't take out the front line. That's where our options are a lot healthier than they were back in August, September. So I don't understand why he went back the way to the lack of width and the lack of movement that we saw with the team yesterday.
See, the Dundee game was interesting because I think you and I both said, Kev, as well, was having that Danilo Egerman, I'd say partnership, but having them both involved, right? Because we know that sometimes we've seen one maybe sit behind the other. Egerman likes to drift a little bit as well at times. But we got a lot of joy out of what was quite a stoic Dundee approach to the game, where it just wouldn't have worked if we didn't have those players in, because they were able to create space by pulling players elsewhere. Cherny did the same, so did Yanis Hadji. And yesterday, I just thought it was, I thought it was right in terms of, the Raskin being dropped, because fair enough, the booking is obviously a concern, but also he has played a lot of football. Connor Barron, who has been excellent across the course of this season, was rested, which again I thought was the right decision previously, because again he'd been playing a lot of football. And I think that what you saw within the first half in Paisley was where we really, really struggled to be able to kind of generate anything when you do take some key players out of that lineup. The first half had everything that was probably what the young ones would call absolute peak Rangers. The first of which happened with Liam Balogun pulling up an Achilles issue. Now, I'm going to praise and criticise Balogun. He did really well in not pulling up for that injury. He covered his area, was able to get the ball away and then go down and obviously get treatment. But, and this is the problem with Liam Balogun, he's far too injury prone. And we already know that when he is fit, we have to really game manage him and manage his minutes, because we just know we can't rely on him for a consistent period. Robin Propper was playing well, and we'll talk about him later on in the build-up to the game, but this is our bread and butter, Kev. We need to be able to beat, the majority of our domestic opponents without having to chop and change a lineup. And when you're doing that for a central defender who, and let's be honest, has not been able to adapt to the physical nature of the Scottish game, then it's a problem, because it's an outlay. And now we're probably going to have to look at our options with him, halfway through his first season. So there's some real concerns with that. But Balogun, it's incredibly frustrating, because we rely on him as much as we do, but we can't rely on him.
And we've always had to manage his minutes, even when he was 3 years younger. We would rotate him in and out, and listen, that's absolutely fine if you've got that Connor Goldson and Hollander there, that you can rotate one of the two positions weekly and do it well and pick and choose your games, and you can control that situation. But where we find ourselves now is that if everyone's fit, Balogun's probably still our best centre back, which is very a worrying statement. You could argue John Suter, and I would debate that way. That's absolutely fine. But for that wee extra burst of pace, Balogun is essential, and his physicality in these games. Robin Propper's probably going to go down the lines of good player, not built for Scottish football. Unfortunately, he's not the only one like that in this squad. And it goes along with a recruitment that's been in the toilet for the last couple of windows. He just, as you say, this is our bread and butter, so we need to buy units, right? It's sometimes it's not sexy, it's not glamorous. Robin Propper has proved in Europe that he can play football, and he's a good footballer when he's up against attackers that want to play football and will not barge into him, elbow him, push and shove him. We would all love to sit and watch wonderful football games every week, Cammy, but that's not Scottish football. So don't buy players for what you wish the league was, buy players for what is the league. I seem to remember when we were talking in the car pod about Propper, we said like Dundee, they never really had much up front, so we've seen the best side of Robin Propper. But there's a reason the manager never picked him for the starting lineup yesterday, and it wasn't to rest him. It's because he knows he's not good with that physicality, which again goes back to why did we buy him? it's just crazy. I'd love to be in that healthy position, Cammy, where we have a squad for domestic games and a squad for European games. Would be absolutely wonderful, but we don't. So we need to get the most out of the players that we buy. I think most of us pegged a couple of weeks ago, or if not months ago, that Propper had loaned back to Holland in the January window, written all over him. He's a wee bit of an upturn in form the last couple of weeks. You might get, and it sounds silly, right? But he played okay against Celtic, because against Kyogo's movement is excellent, but he's not really that physical player. So again, it's more of a mental battle and positioning battle, if that makes sense. But he struggles against the big lumps. And listen, he's not the only defender that we've had in history that's done that, right? Boomsong had problems when he was here for the spell. Connor Goldson had problems against big units that these teams seem to buy. It's not unique to Robin Propper, but he's just really not suited for wet nights away in winter in Paisley, is he?
Well, we were going to come on to this, so since you've spoken about it, let's talk about it now then. We don't know for sure in terms of Niles Coppin still retaining part of his previous role as head of football recruitment. Since moving into the technical director role, I think we have went on the assumption that recruitment will still be a major part of what he has to look at. So I suppose, does the question then boil down to further kind of go into your point that you've made there, Kevin, around you can buy players who you think, in that league, with slightly less of a physical nature or slightly more technical, however else you want to be able to call it, that's grand. And yeah, you're right. There is going to be games like we had against Dundee where Proper could just sit on the halfway line. Not too much pressure. Okay, fair enough. Personally speaking, I think that most managers in Scotland now, if you saw Robin Proper in the lineup, you would be telling your slightly more aggressive striker, that's who you're running towards. Forget whoever's sitting beside him, if it's Balogun or if it's John Stewart, whatever, that's the guy you're going after. Is that going to be an issue if Coppin is going to be looking at players? Does someone, and I have no idea who this person would be before anyone wants to challenge me to answer, but does someone have to be able to explain to him, okay, that's lovely where they're playing at the moment and how good they look to us now, and yeah, they could be value there and it could be a bargain and all the rest of the conversation, but how will it work in Scotland? Does someone need to tap him in the shoulder and say, look, you're going to have to remember where this guy is going to be playing, not where he's playing at the moment? And to your point earlier on, don't think that the majority of our domestic opponents are going to play in a lovely, fluffy way. It's going to be aggressive. It's going to be all about strength. It's going to be about industry. So you're going to have to be able to bring someone who can handle that. Because right now, my big fear is that let's say we get rid of Robin Proper in the January window. We can't replace like for like. It just simply cannot happen.
The problem is that you could argue that he was brought in to replace Ben Davis, who was too weak for the league, and we've downgraded that. I don't know what the profile of defender they were looking for, whether it was they want someone who's going to get involved in the attacks, which is okay. It's a lovely theory, but the first and foremost, we need to be able to defend. We need to be able to head the ball away, or have really good recovery pace, for example. I mean, we've had slow defenders before Cammy. Davy Weir was slow as a week in the jail, but his reading of the game, and he had Bugera beside him, so we could compensate that with people round about him. Proper at times just seems so isolated. As he looks another one of these players that will fall into that category for me of good player, might be lovely in the Dutch league, just not suited for the basket case that is Scottish football.
Well, let's jump back to the game then, Kevin, unfortunately, as we must. And another player who has looked pretty solid throughout his time at Rangers and certainly been called upon and produced some strong performances, had what I can only really describe as a complete brain fart yesterday as St Mirren running through on the right-hand side of our 18-yard box, and out comes Jack Butland. Well, he comes out, then he stops, and then he decides, no, he is going to commit to it. Now, I promised myself before we started recording that we wouldn't talk about officials, we wouldn't talk about VAR. And as I always say here in Heart and Hand, we try to be completely fair. This was one of the dumbest fouls I've ever seen a goalkeeper commit. He rushes out, doesn't even get close to being able to try and really get any kind of form of solid contact in the ball. There is some degree of Rangers cover, but he's made a decision to commit, and commit he did. Absolutely wipes out the St Mirren player. It is a stonewall penalty every single day of the week. I don't think I've actually spoken to a Rangers fan who doesn't think it's a penalty. We were all watching it together yesterday, and everybody in my company, everyone to a man, turns around. Not only is that a penalty, we'll be lucky if it's not a red card. So hopefully, if there's any neutrals listening, you'll realise that when we have complained about VAR in the past, we are doing so from what we believe to be a fair standpoint. I have no idea what the hell he's thinking here, Kev. And I did see someone, I can't remember, it might have even been yourself, someone had commented saying it might have been better if we'd get a red card, because then at least we could have brought Liam Kelly on to help out with the penalty, because Butland, it is not his strength whatsoever. And as we get to the half-hour mark, St Mirren find themselves a goal up.
It was a strange game the first half, right? There was really nothing happening. And then one long ball over the top just caused all sort of chaos. And as you say, I don't know why Butland came, because Proper had actually got back into position. I think there was one other player covering. So if the St Mirren player takes that, and they would probably have to hit it really early, it would have to be an exceptional shot to beat him from there. And if he does that, then you probably think, fair enough, what a goal that is. Look at their winner, as we'll talk about later. That's a wonderful strike, fair enough. I don't know what, because I've watched it a couple of times and he goes to do like a sort of catching action as if he's trying to catch the ball, but you're like, there's sort of a man in the way, you can't just come out and clear him out. And as you say, it's Stonewall penalty. There's absolutely no VAR needed here. This is the most penalty you'll see. It's a brain fart. Unfortunately for us, our players seem to have them quite a lot and they seem to spread. So no issues with the penalty. And as you say, Butland is good at lots of things, an improvement in an aging Alan McGregor on lots of things, but penalty saving is not one. But perhaps we're maybe a wee bit harsh because Alan McGregor was probably one of the best keepers I've ever seen at saving penalty kicks.
Fair. I mean, fair, but still, the whole decision-making process for Jack Butland at that point, it beggars belief. Rangers go into the break. Also managed to get a couple of bookings at this point for Cherny Diomande. Even the manager's booked by this stage as well, due to how frustrated he was getting. And I'll be honest with you, by this stage, I was like, we've already conceded. St Mirren were trying to get a bit of joy down our right-hand side, and they were trying to build up some play from that. The penalties given to them as an absolute gift from Rangers. We're 1-0 down now at this stage as well, and the manager's immediate response to that is to bring on Danilo and Nico Raskin at half-time. Off comes Bajrami and Connor Barron. Now, this is where it comes back to when we talk about, we'd all been screaming for Bajrami to almost play within that 10 role. That's what we had thought he was getting brought in to be able to try and do. Yesterday did not do him a lot of favours in terms of being able to try and lend itself into that argument for me.
It didn't, but we need to help him with the players round about him. Like Hadji is quite similar to Bajrami. Like he's not going to knock the ball past someone and beat him with pace. So there you've got your static there. Igaman likes to wander, and that's why I think him and Danilo work quite well, because Danilo will play sort of in between the width of the goals, as where the wee Moroccan magician, as we're sort of trying to call him now, he'll just go wandering and he'll go and pick up the ball, and you'll look up for someone to cross the ball and he's not there. So Bajrami doesn't have that option of someone to hit and then go past or play a wee through ball for. So I'm not writing Bajrami off as a 10 just yet. I would like to see him with more players round about him that can do things. And I say Cherny that had a really poor game yesterday, and that's the discussion we had on the preview show last week about lone players being our best players the last couple of seasons, and Cherny's contributed, so again we'll allow him an off day. Bajrami's a strange one though, Cammy. We've spoken about this before, how I think he's really similar to Hadji, and it's like, you already had Hadji here, why did you not just pay the money if you wanted to play Hadji? And then we went out and signed Bajrami in the last day of the window, and you're like, well, and then the manager's like, oh right, I really wish we had Hadji, and you're like, well, you've got him. I just don't think the two of them work too well together, maybe in certain games, but like when you've just, we've no pace in the team, and I don't just mean in the legs, I mean we're not quick enough on the ball, we don't move it quickly enough. I say I wouldn't write Bajrami off after one bad game in Paisley. I'd like to see him given a run there, and if it's possible, try and get more legs round about him, more movement round about him. I say if that's Danilo up front, if it's someone else, if it's with actual wingers in positions, I don't know. If it's two strikers with slight tweaks that we've seen before, fair enough. But no, he never had a good game. The more worrying thing for me, Cammy, is how many times this year, I don't have the stats to hand right, it wouldn't surprise me if it was in double figures, have we had to make subs at half time because of how dire the first half was?
Oh yeah, it must be in double figures. I'm almost certain of it. And this is where it becomes back to that focus on the manager. Well, not that comes back to, okay, so you didn't get it right. You've got half time to be able to change it, albeit you've had to, have a forced substitution because of the Balogun injury. But it's problematic because there are far too many players within our squads, many of whom are first-team regulars, I would say, that it almost just feels like you're not getting anywhere enough from. And once you start to take some of the players out of that equation because you're dropping them, resting them, cautious about using them because the bookings, however you want to be able to try and talk about it, it now becomes a real downturn in the team, and that is just simply not a long-term answer. It just can't continue. Rangers were able to get both of those substitutions involved in what turned out to be an equaliser with Danilo finishing from close range. I think that when you saw the change from half-time, it was a different Rangers team that came out in the second half. The manager made comments in his post-match presser about he was angry at what happened in the first half. He knew it wasn't good enough. So he obviously put it back onto the players to go and change that. I'm going to be honest, Kev, I don't know about you, keen to get your thoughts, but the minute Danilo scored that goal with 30 minutes left to play, I thought, okay, now we've got enough in us to be able to go and get a winner here. We were creating chances. We just mentioned Egaman. He got the ball out on the left-hand side again, played a lovely 1-2 with Czerny, and he's at the corner of the 6-yard box and he hits it over. That isn't good enough. We've obviously hit the bar, and obviously St Mirren hit the bar as well. But with half an hour to go, and you've got your equaliser, and you look like you're starting to motor, the same old issue with Rangers across the course of this season away from home creeps in, which is we are just simply not good enough at scoring goals away from home.
Our away record in general is appalling. The goals scored, like you mentioned, I think we're like 21 or 22 goals behind Celtic in away games this year. It's a disgrace.
Well, we are recording this 4 days before 2025, and we haven't scored double figures away from home in the league this season. I think we're sitting at 7.
It's unacceptable. But if you ask me, when Danilo put the ball in the back of the net, who'll win this game, I'd have put my mortgage on Rangers, because the start of the second half was terrific. It was everything we lacked in the first half. There was pace, there was tempo, there was movement, there was shots on goal. The St Mirren players were all doing that thing of looking about. They were in panic. They didn't know what to do. They were hemmed in. They could not get out. Every time they pumped the ball forward, we recycled it and we were back on them. We get the equaliser. You think, here we go. This is us turned up now. Let's knock this away, Rangers, and move on to the next game. And then it stops. You're like, it disappeared as quickly as it came. You make a valid point about how we can't really afford to take good players out of the team. Obviously, we rested Raskin. We've lost John Souttar because of injury, who was a big part. And John Souttar for this season can say he's been good, and he's one of the players that can hold his hands up and say, look, I'm contributing here. But when we try to rotate for whatever reason, the players that come in just aren't good enough if they're not on form. The first batch of subs we made yesterday were brilliant. Danilo done his part. He's contributed the last couple of games with an assist and then a goal. You've got Raskin that's contributing. Again, although he's a 6, he gets us forward, because his first thing to do is when he wins the ball, he doesn't take 5, 6, 7 touches. He just moves it forward to a Rangers player, which might sound like a really silly comment, but it helps. And then the tempo just increases like that. But as soon as we get that goal, Cammy, it just seemed to stop, and then it's as if we reverted back to what we were doing in the first half, or not doing.
And almost to that extent as well, I wonder if there's some misplaced arrogance in this Rangers team that thinks that because we have had that 50-minute start of the second half and then we got an equaliser, with 30 to go, it should just fall our way. And I'm going to give Stephen Robinson some immense credit here, because for the last 15 minutes, he brings on Callum Boud-Muntz, who's 24, Callum Penman. This was laterally with about 8 minutes to go. Callum Penman and Evan Mooney, both of whom are 17. So a 24-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 17-year-old, when you are playing Rangers at home and it's 1-1 and your team has been in the game. Two of those players put the final nail in the coffin with Boyd Munt scoring in deep into injury time. Kev, this goal in itself is just farcical in a number of different ways. Dujan Sterling does absolutely nothing whatsoever to give himself any kind of credit by just. I think he overcommits and then he slips, and before you know it, we're now on the back foot. However, there are a number of players been able to come back in and cover what should have stopped a cross going into the box. Falls to St Mirren player who's got Robin Proper shielding him. He has to be able to try and go in the only direction he can, which then comes out to Boyd Munson. It's a low-drilled shot past Jack Butland. Again, we did have players back, and there's some degree of commendation in that, but we couldn't stop what felt to me like a fairly basic play. But Robinson, he wasn't happy with just being able to sit in. He didn't want to go in there and just leave it at whatever the stalemate was going to be. He just wanted to roll the dice. And listen, I cannot commend him more for that, because it's so easy for you just to be able to say, right, let's just get the point, let's just sit in, let's not do anything else with it. But St Mirren could smell blood from the first whistle yesterday. And there was no reason for them just to sit back and stay off Rangers. If Rangers weren't going to continue to apply on the pressure, why would you bother sitting back? And I'm going to be honest with you, as much as it was frustrating yesterday, you can't say St Mirren were not good value for it. But we've just simply not impressed ourselves in the game well enough, anywhere near well enough. And frankly, Rangers got what they deserved out of it.
They did. As you say, fair play to St Mirren. Again, if you'd asked Stephen Robinson when we got to 1-1, do you think you'll take anything in this game? He'd have probably said, no, they're all over the top of us. He made some tweaks, he made some changes. Like you say, he didn't just fly on defenders and hope for the best, like fill his team with a back seven or anything. He knew he'd an out ball, and he knew he always had a chance. And listen, he obviously knows that our situation, how far we are behind the league. We can't afford to go any further back. He knew that the longer the game went on, the more men we would commit forward, and they would probably get one chance on the counter. As you say, 3 men go to stop that cross and don't do it. That's just seems to be the hallmark of every Rangers goal conceded, is we don't stop the cross. Proper, I'm going to be kind here and sort of say, like, he's done his job. As you say, he shielded the guy and he's forced him to go back the way. That's not bad, because we don't want him to overcommit and the guy gets a shot away. So he's marshalled his man, forced it back to the edge of the area. Then it's a wonderful shot, right, under not enough pressure from us. It's a brilliant shot right into the side netting. Butland can't really do anything about it. But yeah, we've been stung. But again, it's just not good enough from us. I mean, we brought more players on, Cammy, like your Dessers and your Ridvans, and they made us worse. Dessers
they were absolutely ineffectual. Absolutely. And again, I understand that not every player can play every minute of the game, so you're going to have to rotate some. I didn't think Jeffrey was great yesterday. Yilmaz, I'm going to give a little bit of credit to, because we know that he's still been able to come back in to get a full 90 in him. If he's here after the window, I'll probably be pretty disappointed, but absolutely ineffectual yesterday. Cyril Dessers has now lost so much credit with the fans, as far as I'm concerned, Kev, through a number of recent abject performances, that when you're looking with 10 minutes to go and that's the guy you're bringing on, I think it's a tough ask for people to believe in it.
If you're going to be kind to Dessers, right, and I'm trying to be kind because it's a season of goodwill to all men, we never created really anything for him. Ridvan, I don't have the sympathy for, right? It's just been a total waste of time and money. I think his first action when he came on was he had the ball, the space all opened up in front of him, and he just launches out of the park, and that is just so frustrating as a forward player. You just, what chance have you got? But it's where we are. It's, as you say, we're still in the situation we need to move a whole lot of players on that we're paying far too much for. Such a wage drain on the squad. The big issue will be in January, Cammy, is do you go and get centre-backs in just now? Do you go and get temporary centre-backs that cover you to the end of the season? Or do you just sort of hold on to your cash and utilise the fringe players like Leon King, who I think me or you might get a start before Leon King, and just sort of plod on to the end of the season, because I think it would take a sort of major miracle for us to challenge for the league title from this position.
It would, and that probably brings us on nicely. We'll talk about Motherwell in just a second, but let's do a little bit of forecasting, Kev, because it does tie into the January window. So let's hope that we are able to beat Motherwell, but we go into the Old Firm game on the 2nd of January. If the manager loses that, and let's say we get to that particular game, but let's say it's even as it stands at the moment, currently 12 points behind Celtic, that would mean we're going 15 points behind Celtic with virtually no chance whatsoever. I mean, it's slim at the moment, but if we get to that stage and it's 15 points between slim and hee-haw, slim has just left town in terms of even being able to try and fight for the league. Do you keep the manager?
No. We had a discussion on a pod the other day, and if you'd asked me a month ago, I was saying he has to go. I'm not going to say won me round, but I could see of more what was happening and what he was trying to do over the last few weeks. And this is not one of these situations where the sort of first bump in the road, you sort of want to burn it all down again. We lost the cup final. Now, yep, you can look at the circumstances. Doesn't matter. Record book shows you lost. Right now, he's sort of lucky that Aberdeen have fell off a cliff, because if they can continued any sort of form that they had, it would be under even more pressure. We've already spoken about the away record. It's abysmal. That's what got Van Bronckhorst sacked, was poor play in the away record. He couldn't beat these generic run-of-the-mill jobber SPFL teams, no matter how well we've done in Europe. But I just think the fans have given up. I think he was winning some of them back. He was getting a wee bit more benefit of the doubt. But then that's just punctured all hope. Had he beat St Mirren, beat Motherwell, beat Celtic, people might have been willing, and I would have been in that group, to give him the season and say, right, okay, we're probably still not going to win the league, but we can see you progressing. You've now beaten Celtic. On we go. Let's see what we can do. We can see improvements to young players, right? But we get it. We can see what it is. Give us a couple of reasons to feel motivated by bringing in some players that, again, we can get excited about. Let's move out some of the duds. But again, we're just reverting back to type, and it's now looking like the good play was a blip rather than the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I think, the difference being is that, plenty of fans, myself included, and maybe it's just blind optimism, but I think many of us thought, well, have we turned a corner now? Is this now what we want to be able to get in? The counterpoint to that is, I'll give you my argument in just a moment, but we'll do a little bit of kind of point counterpoint, because the counterpoint to that is that he has been incredibly unlucky with injuries, coupled with horrendous recruitment. Now, when I say horrendous recruitment, I don't just mean guys like, Proper, who we just, as we've discussed, we know that there's a gap there, right? So we need to address that first and foremost. But Danilo obviously was injured. Egaman came in, wasn't ready to start, missed a hefty chunk of the season, which then meant that, we were already playing catch up by that point. So he's going to feel like as if he's got one arm tied behind his back with that. Suter, obviously the most recent injury. Balogun hopefully won't be anywhere near as long as Suter, hopefully fit in return for the Old Firm game, because he absolutely has to play in that. We've had, in my opinion, some absolute miracles in the form of guys like Hadji being able to come back in and hit the ground running. Again, wasn't there as an option for the manager at the beginning of the season. Yes, I know that people could say, well, maybe if that situation had been rectified earlier on, what could have been. But the thing is, Yanis Hadji had his part to play with in that as well. And it's just been incredibly, unlucky across a number of different fronts. Where the manager doesn't help himself, and this is my argument, is he hasn't been able to pass a test. And I keep using that phrase whenever we talk about a big game being able to come up. Yeah, I understand the League Cup final was its own, absolute circus because of officials. But we go back to that 4-on-1 situation and we go 2-0 up. I fundamentally believe we've got the League Cup sitting in Ibrox right now. We've discussed already the fact that we've got team selection issues that we need to be able to bring in, and he then has to change it at half time. And that's not, again, as we've said already, but that's not contained to what happened in Paisley yesterday. He needs to be able to beat Celtic, and maybe if he wins the Old Firm game on the 2nd of January, then we're due some luck in the transfer window. Maybe January will be the window that we manage to get some players in. And I wouldn't press you on it, Kevin, in terms of who do we buy from where and in what positions, because for me what has to happen is no matter who we bring in and who is overseeing that process, which by the way it'd be nice of Rangers to be able to clarify that, whoever it comes in has to play. And what I mean by that is I don't need them to immediately remove the guy who's currently in the team ahead of them. I mean, they need to be available. We cannot go back down this route of the Eagleman situation where we've got players who will take time to adapt to life in Scotland or, be pressured into obligations to buy with players who maybe don't have fantastic injury records. So there is a lot of work to be done with that. We'll get to Fir Park now, Kev, and a Motherwell team that went to Parkhead yesterday almost seemed as if they might have been able to try and get a little bit of joy, completely collapsed, and Celtic ran out 4-0 winners. Motherwell's going to be a tough battle. You're playing against a Rangers team that has had a major, major bump in the road. There will not be a lot of goodwill around the building in Ibrox at the moment, but Rangers are going to have to be able to conjure up a response. They're going to have to be able to do it because dropping further points at Fir Park, I don't think will make a very pleasant atmosphere at Ibrox for the Old Firm game if things don't start brightly for us.
No, you're right. I mean, we'll obviously go into Motherwell in a lot more detail on the preview show on our Patreon site, but we've played them twice already this season. Beaten them 2-1 both times, both close games. You're right about Parkhead. To be fair to them, they've done really well and they kept Celtic at bay till Celtic got awarded a penalty. I think it was in stoppage time in the first half, so that just sort of kills any momentum that they've got. Listen, better teams than Motherwell have been to Parkhead and tried a bit of a doing. Their form's been a wee bit erratic this year, but if you're Stuart Kettlewell, you'll probably fancy a go at this Rangers team. Why wouldn't you? I mean, you know how fragile the confidence will be. It's sort of a VAR derby, this one, isn't it, Cammy? Because Motherwell have been done by VAR a couple of times as well. They probably had more complaints than we have, which is saying something. Of course, the prize asset is Lennon Miller, who has been heavily linked with us and moved abroad. Be interesting to see how they deal with that situation in the transfer window. I say this, it's one of these tricky games where if you go back to last season, this was sort of the downfall of Clermont started with that Motherwell game. That infamous game now that will probably go up there with Rangers Motherwell games all the way back to those old enough to remember the 9 in a row game and things like that. That was meant to be the big celebration, and they've got a way of just kicking us when we least expect or at least need it, the Motherwell. Kettlewell, I've got a lot of time for as a man. As a manager, he's seems to be, I don't want to say up and down, but he's good at what he does, if that makes sense, and I think he's a really nice guy. It'd be interesting to see just to see how they play it, because he's been under a bit of pressure recently. But I say if you put your Motherwell glasses on, Cammy, you've really got to fancy going at this Rangers defence, because it will be proper and sterling. There's no other real options. You're playing at home, you're the home team, you've just watched what St Mirren done, and they'll probably come with a sort of similar game plan on the weekend.
Yeah, and listen, this is where Rangers have to respond. I've said this before, Kev, but I hope the players see it as an opportunity to get the train back on the tracks. We shouldn't go with any fear. Of course, we shouldn't. We're Rangers after all. But we need an injection of confidence. We need to have a lot of energy and a lot of intensity around us. And wherever possible, we need to start. I mean, we need to start the game well. We can't have a repeat of that first half against St Mirren. But more for me, I think what we need to do is just assert ourselves a little bit, because this is a Rangers team that's capable of hurting teams, not so much on the road, I understand, but we have been able to produce performances which are excellent. We just need to tap back into that, and we need to just put the St Mirren situation behind us. We need to put the VAR situation behind us at the moment, because I do want that to come back up again before we play Celtic. But it's just about focusing on Sunday now and just getting the 3 points. If you win it by 5 or 1, I don't care. We just need to be able to make sure that we just don't give them more of a lead. It's just to ensure that we play to our game plan, and the manager has to play strongest team from the start, as far as I'm concerned.
He doesn't listen. Managers always telling us, "Oh, I only take one game at a time." Not at this period. You don't. You look at the Celtic game and you sort of work backwards. I can't see him going with 2 strikers at that game, so there's absolutely no reason why we can't use 2 going to Fir Park. There'll be certain other things that we need to take into consideration. I think Yefty might be 1 yellow card away from a booking. That's something he might need to look at and put Ridvan in if he wants to start Yefty in the Old Firm game. So certain things that will be sort of weighing down on your mind as you make the selection. Raskin will need to come back in. He needs to. I say we always say on here, Cammy, that would like to see Rangers go and win the game. Like, go and see if you started the game the way you started that second half against St Mirren. Go 2-0 up early, and then you're looking for the third one late on. Ideal. Absolutely ideal. But we seem to get dragged into fights and battles that we don't need to be in. That we keep games going. The Dundee game was a pretty good example. Sure, we hit the bar 4 times, but you still get that wee niggle of doubt because it's only 1-0 that you get a freak punt up the park, or the opposition get a corner or something in the last minute, and we've been stung too many times with it. I just love to be able to go to Fir Park, get a couple of goals early, and then we could rest some players up. But Rangers being Rangers, you just feel that we'll make it a bit more difficult than that.
Yeah, if there's a way that we can make it hard on ourselves, Rangers will always find it. Well, listen, thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully been a little bit cathartic for you. I'd love it if we could come on here and have all of the optimism and positivity in the world, but we are very much in a realistic situation now as well. If you'd like to hear more from myself and Kevin and a whole host of our brilliant podding family, then head on over to patreon.com/Heart and Hand. David will be back with the flagship on Monday to unpack the events at Fir Park as well. Thank you to our show sponsors, Zenith Coins. Please head on over to zenithcoins.com. Our producers, Mike Lee and Paul Myers, all of you for listening. But for me, I have to say my most important thanks for the man brave enough to be able to come on and talk about that absolute nonsense yesterday, Kev Armstrong. Kev, thank you so much for coming on.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, mate.
Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.